Today, we're going to look at 6 deadly accidents that happened during live TV events, from a compromised overhead camera rig still in operation to a fragile glass set piece used for seated support in a dangerous setup without approval records. It was January 8, 2017, at a regional football stadium in Florida, where the crisp winter air carried the roar of thousands of fans. Crews prepared for a live televised game as an overhead cable camera system hung above the field, recently modified under tight production deadlines. Tully Vark, a 38-year-old broadcast technician, moved confidently along the sideline. With 14 years of live sports experience, he had earned a reputation for his meticulous attention to detail and ability to work seamlessly under pressure. His job required him to coordinate camera movements while maintaining safe clearance between personnel and the suspended equipment above. Colleagues knew him as someone who preferred to position himself close to active systems, using hand signals to communicate with camera operators across the field. That evening, he wore his standard-issue headset and carried a clipboard detailing camera positioning protocols. During pre-game setup, technicians discovered damage to one support cable, limited to what appeared to be outer strands only. The damage appeared superficial, and vendor documentation indicated the cable still met minimum static load requirements. A field-rated temporary swaged fitting was installed under time pressure, pending full replacement after the game, though it was not recommended for sustained dynamic broadcast loads. With broadcast timing constraints and a stadium full of spectators, the crew proceeded without conducting additional dynamic load tests. The game progressed smoothly through the first quarter and into the second. Stadium lights illuminated the field as players moved through their formations. Midway through the period, the overhead camera began accelerating laterally to reposition above the near sideline. As the system accelerated, automated tension compensation lagged by milliseconds, long enough for the repaired section to absorb a sudden spike beyond its rated dynamic tolerance. The temporary fitting failed catastrophically at its anchor point. The affected cable snapped free, instantly releasing the stored tension that had been supporting the 100-pound camera unit. The camera dropped briefly before the remaining 3 cables arrested its fall and forced the system into a severe lateral swing, creating a violent imbalance in the system. The sudden shift caused the camera to swing in a wide arc toward the sideline while the failed cable recoiled downward with tremendous force. Tully stood approximately 15 feet from the anchor line, facing away as he signaled to a camera operator. The recoiling cable struck him across the upper chest and neck before rebounding, the force enough to knock him off his feet and slam his head against the turf. The overhead camera's live feed continued broadcasting, spinning rapidly as the remaining cables oscillated wildly. For less than 2 seconds, the feed spun before the broadcast director abruptly cut to a wide crowd shot as crew members rushed onto the field. On-site medical staff reached Tully immediately, but he remained motionless on the artificial turf. He was transported in critical condition and pronounced dead shortly after arrival at a regional trauma center. The medical examiner later listed the cause of death as blunt force trauma to the neck and head, resulting from cable recoil impact. The investigation cited procedural violations, including the use of a temporary fitting outside manufacturer guidelines and insufficient dynamic testing prior to live operation. No defects were found in the camera unit itself or the original cable sections. The broadcast operator immediately suspended use of the overhead camera system for the remainder of the event. After a prolonged delay, the game resumed without further sideline or overhead coverage, leaving officials to rely on standard fixed cameras for the broadcast's conclusion. It was February 3rd, 2017, inside Studio B at a regional television station in North Carolina. The temperature-controlled studio floor held steady conditions while lighting rigs, and 3 fixed cameras were aligned for a live morning lifestyle segment focused on home decor. Floor cables were taped along marked paths, and movable furniture pieces had been arranged to resemble a casual living room layout for broadcast. Cora Twigg, 29, hosted the station's rotating home and improvement features. She had worked on air for 3 years and was known among producers for staying on timing marks and maintaining consistent delivery during live segments. That morning's program included a short-seated introduction before a demonstration on low-cost room upgrades. The set included a decorative glass-top table taken from prop storage earlier in the week. The table had been moved between sets multiple times over the past year. No manufacturer rating label or load documentation was attached to the frame. Crew logs showed the table had visible wear at several welded joints. Small cracks were present near two corners of the metal support frame. Later inspection would note faint internal stress lines in the glass consistent with repeated handling and minor impacts during transport. Because the piece was categorized as decorative rather than structural, no load test was performed before placement. It was positioned near camera 2 as a casual anchor point for the host's opening posture. As the live segment began, Cora stepped into position and turned toward the primary camera. Following the blocking notes for a relaxed presentation angle, she shifted backward and sat on the near edge of the glass surface. Her weight transferred through one corner of the frame instead of the center supports. Under the uneven load, the weakened joint failed. The frame twisted and the annealed glass panel fractured. A large broken section dropped through the distorted frame opening as she fell. A sharp edge of the shattered panel penetrated her upper thigh during the collapse and severed the femoral artery. She fell backward onto the studio floor as the remaining glass sections slid free. Blood loss began immediately and spread across the finished surface beneath the table position. The broadcast cameras continued transmitting for several seconds as floor staff moved into frame. The control room cut away from the shot and switched to standby graphics. Crew members applied manual pressure using available cloth materials, but no dedicated bleeding control kit was stored within immediate reach on the studio floor, and no one present had advanced trauma training. Emergency services were contacted at once through station security. Paramedics arrived approximately 8 minutes after the call. Despite continued pressure attempts, blood loss was extensive. She was pronounced dead at the scene. The medical examiner determined the cause of death was fatal hemorrhage, resulting from femoral artery severance due to glass penetration injury. A post-incident review concluded that structural fatigue in the table frame and the absence of load verification directly contributed to the failure. The station removed all unrated furniture props from active sets and required documented weight capacity and inspection clearance for any item used for seated or weight-bearing positioning during live broadcasts. Future set approvals were routed through engineering review before on-air use. It was June 18, 2015 in Iowa City, where the midday sun cast long shadows across the river running through the center of town. The water level was higher than normal following a controlled upstream dam release earlier that morning. Television crews lined the banks to cover a live charity raft crossing event, where volunteers attempted to navigate improvised platforms across a 200-foot stretch of moving water. Temporary camera platforms and a mobile broadcast truck were positioned along the east bank. A wide-shot camera remained fixed on the main crossing lane, while a second unit tracked participants moving downstream. Safety boats waited below the course boundary. Event briefings noted increased flow, but organizers determined the crossing could proceed with additional downstream spotters. Benson Job, 41, worked as a warehouse supervisor and had registered as a volunteer participant through a workplace charity drive. He was physically active and swam regularly at an indoor recreation center. Organizers recorded that he passed a basic swim check during registration. Standard safety gear was available on site, including flotation vests, but adult participants who demonstrated swimming ability were allowed to cross without one. River measurements taken that morning showed current speeds near 4 miles per hour, roughly double the usual pace. At mid-channel, the river narrowed, compressing the flow and increasing velocity. Survey notes later documented standing waves and rotating surface boils forming above a submerged rock shelf, extending from the western side. Water temperature measured 68 degrees Fahrenheit, tolerable, but capable of reducing muscle efficiency with prolonged exposure. Rescue crews were staged downstream, though response time depended on drift speed and visibility. Benson began his crossing standing on a wooden raft platform stabilized by plastic barrels. As the raft entered the narrowed channel, turbulence increased. Uneven current pushed against the underside of the platform, causing repeated lateral rocking. Surface spray and biological growth made the deck slick. As the raft crossed a turbulent boil line, his footing slipped and his weight shifted off-center. The platform tilted, and he fell into the moving water on the downstream side. The current immediately separated him from the raft and carried him toward the constricted section. His pool-based swimming technique did not translate effectively in fast current, where maintaining orientation requires angled ferry positioning and defensive floating. Witness video showed him attempting forward strokes while being pulled sideways by the flow. During the downstream drift, he struck a submerged rock shelf and disappeared beneath the surface. Later incident reports noted that turbidity and surface disturbance reduced rescue visibility in that section. He did not reappear after submerging. The fixed broadcast camera continued showing the now empty raft moving through frame, prompting the control truck to cut away from the live river shot to studio standby graphics within seconds. Safety boats deployed immediately and began a downstream sweep pattern. Responders located him approximately 400 yards from the crossing line after a short search lasting several minutes. He was brought to shore, where paramedics already assigned to the event assessed him and found no signs of life. He was pronounced dead at the scene. The medical examiner determined the cause of death was drowning, complicated by blunt head trauma. A post-event review concluded that elevated flow from the dam release and hazardous mid-channel hydraulics exceeded safe limits for unsecured raft crossings. Organizers revised future event rules to require mandatory flotation devices and stricter current speed thresholds for any live broadcast river crossings. It was August 21, 2016, in Bayou Larkin, Louisiana, a low-lying river town about 30 miles south of Baton Rouge. Overnight thunderstorms had dumped nearly 6 inches of rain in less than 12 hours, overwhelming storm drains and leaving several downtown streets partially flooded. By dawn, water still pooled along Jefferson Street, especially near its intersection with Main Avenue, where runoff from nearby parking lots had nowhere to drain. Dudley Spall, a 52-year-old freelance camera operator, had been working on television broadcasts for over 2 decades. Known for his meticulous attention to detail and preference for handling his own equipment setup, Dudley took pride in delivering steady, professional shots, even under challenging conditions. His weathered hands moved with practiced efficiency as he adjusted the tripod legs, positioning the camera for the morning's flood coverage segment. Colleagues often remarked on his calm demeanor during live broadcasts, never showing stress even when technical problems arose. He had earned a reputation for reliability among local news directors. The portable generator hummed steadily from its position uphill, feeding power through extension cables that snaked across the wet pavement toward the broadcast equipment. The station had pulled the aging unit from backup inventory after its primary field generator flooded in storage overnight. Due to the emergency deployment, the crew bypassed the usual power distribution box and ran cables directly from the generator to save time. Dudley wore his standard rubber-soled work boots, but had left his insulated gloves in the van, confident in his ability to make quick adjustments during the live shot. The standing water around the setup measured roughly 1 inch deep, its surface darkened by roadway runoff that had swept oil and debris from the asphalt. As the live segment began, Dudley noticed the framing needed adjustment. Without breaking from his professional routine, he reached toward the metal tripod to reposition it slightly. The camera remained powered on, its electrical load transferring through the metal equipment as it stood in standing water. The frayed power cable supplying the camera had been damaged during transport, its protective coating compromised in a way that wasn't immediately visible to the naked eye. When Dudley's hand made contact with the tripod, electrical current was able to travel through the contaminated floodwater pooled around the equipment. The electricity traveled up through his body as he stood in the conductive mixture. His muscles contracted involuntarily, disrupting his ability to control his movements as the electrical current surged through his body. The camera continued recording as Dudley's body remained rigid for several seconds before the circuit breaker finally tripped. Only then did his muscles relax, causing him to collapse forward. His body fell partially into the camera's frame as the equipment tilted sideways, capturing the moment before crew members rushed to cut the live feed. Emergency responders reached the scene within minutes, but Dudley was pronounced dead at the location. The medical examiner determined that cardiac arrest caused by electrical shock was the cause of death. Investigators later confirmed the generator lacked ground fault protection, and floodwater contaminated with roadway runoff dramatically increased conductivity. The incident prompted several regional broadcasters to review their field safety protocols for wet weather coverage. The local broadcast operator immediately replaced all field power cables and implemented new safety protocols for wet weather coverage. The investigation revealed that regular equipment inspections could have identified the cable damage before the incident occurred. Coverage of the flood aftermath resumed later that day from a different, safer location. It was December 2, 2015, inside a studio kitchen set in Savannah, where multiple cameras were positioned for a live morning cooking demonstration. Production staff finalized equipment and burner placement as the broadcast prepared to go on air. Midge Krent, a 61-year-old set utility worker, had been assisting with cooking segments at the local station for nearly 8 years. Known for her meticulous attention to detail and quiet efficiency, she handled equipment setup and last-minute adjustments that kept productions running smoothly. Her co-workers appreciated her reliability and thorough knowledge of the studio's portable cooking equipment. The segment featured a portable propane burner that had been repositioned several times during the morning setup to achieve optimal camera angles. The flexible gas hose connecting the burner to its fuel source showed visible surface cracking along a 6-inch section near the connection point. The hose had been in regular use for approximately 2 years without replacement. Production timing pressures had eliminated the standard leak detection test that normally preceded live cooking segments. The show's schedule had been compressed due to earlier technical delays, leaving insufficient time for complete safety checks. Midge leaned in close to the burner assembly to make final adjustments to the cookware positioning, placing herself within 18 inches of the gas connection point. As the segment began, gas began leaking from the compromised hose connection, creating an invisible but flammable vapor cloud around the cooking area. Later inspection suggested the leak had developed gradually over time, as long-term hose wear and surface cracking eventually reached the inner gas layer. Partial enclosure around the counter base and limited low-level ventilation allowed heavier-than-air propane to collect near the work surface and build to dangerous concentrations. When the burner was ignited for the cooking demonstration, the flame immediately found the leaked gas vapor. A flash fire erupted across the countertop surface, the fuel-air mixture igniting in a sudden deflagration that spread rapidly. The flash fire produced intense heat and a rapid flame front that extended several feet from the original ignition point. Midge's clothing ignited immediately as the flash fire engulfed the area where she was working. The synthetic fabric of her work shirt caught fire and spread quickly across her upper body. She collapsed behind the counter as the flames continued to burn, falling out of the camera's view but remaining in the immediate danger zone. Studio crew members rushed to deploy fire extinguishers, while the live feed was immediately cut to a commercial break. The portable extinguishing systems successfully suppressed the flames within 30 seconds, but Midge had sustained deep partial thickness and full thickness burns across 60% of her body during the brief but intense exposure. The severity of the thermal damage proved catastrophic despite rapid suppression and aggressive airway and fluid resuscitation attempts. Midge had already sustained extensive full-thickness and deep partial-thickness burns across most of her upper body. Despite advanced airway management and burn treatment efforts later that day, she did not survive her injuries. The medical examiner ruled the death a thermal fatality caused by severe burn trauma with smoke inhalation. Fire investigators traced the ignition source to hose degradation at the propane connection point. Following the findings, the studio removed all portable gas burners from active sets and required documented inspection intervals for any future fuel-powered equipment. Live cooking segments were halted until revised safety controls were approved. It was July 7, 2018, on a crowded boardwalk in Rehoboth Beach, where a live game show taping was underway. Cameras, safety barriers, and mechanical props were positioned as staff prepared the audience participation segment for broadcast. Paxson Dwale, a 17-year-old high school student, had arrived with friends for a day at the beach. He was known among classmates for volunteering in school activities and public events. When production assistants began selecting audience participants for on-camera challenges, he volunteered. Registration records showed a signed parental consent waiver had been submitted online prior to the event, though his parents were not present at the boardwalk that day. The featured segment used a rotating mechanical arm fitted with small camera mounts and prize indicators. The device had been assembled that morning. It extended 12 feet from a central pivot and weighed approximately 150 pounds, including mounted equipment. Safety barriers were positioned about 8 feet from the rotation center, inside the arm's full sweep radius, and relied primarily on staff enforcement and floor markings, rather than physical exclusion. The low profile of the barriers was chosen to preserve camera sight lines. Investigators later found that production staff had increased the rotational speed beyond the manufacturer's recommended setting to create more dynamic visuals for broadcast. The arm was operating at approximately 16 revolutions per minute instead of the specified 12 RPM. The higher speed increased tip velocity and strike energy at the outer edge. No additional exclusion distance or upgraded barriers were added after the speed change. As the segment began, participants were guided into marked standing positions near the apparatus. Paxson stepped forward beyond the painted boundary line while looking toward a cue monitor. Staff assigned to perimeter control did not reposition him before the rotation cycle resumed. The arm accelerated into its programmed spin pattern. Because of the increased rotational speed, the outer sweep covered ground faster than expected under the original safety calculations. When Paxson recognized his position relative to the moving arm, he attempted to step back toward the marked zone. The closing distance was too short for safe clearance. The rotating arm struck him on the side of the head at high rotational speed. Due to rotational inertia, the arm continued through part of its arc before the emergency stop engaged and brought the system to a halt. The impact caused immediate collapse onto the boardwalk surface. The wide broadcast camera captured the apparatus passing through frame before the control booth cut away to a different camera angle, and then to holding graphics. Nearby audience members moved back as floor staff entered the area. On-site medics assigned to the permitted event responded immediately from a nearby standby point. Assessment found no signs of consciousness and severe head trauma, consistent with a high-energy strike. Resuscitation efforts were attempted on location but were unsuccessful. The medical examiner later ruled the death a fatal traumatic brain injury caused by blunt force impact from rotating equipment. Scene measurements confirmed that the higher rotational speed expanded the effective hazard zone beyond the barrier line. Investigators concluded that operating parameter changes without recalculating exclusion distance, combined with failure to enforce participant boundaries, directly led to the fatal exposure. Following the findings, the production company suspended use of all rotating mechanical game elements and required engineering clearance and recalculated safety perimeters for any future motion-based props used in live audience broadcasts. Thanks for watching. Want to see more? Click on your screen now.